So welcome to Abe Solario from Sustainable CT. And Abe, let's give you a chance to introduce yourself a little bit in the program. And, we'd love to ask you questions. And I think some groups in town have already availed themselves, or at least are very aware of this opportunity that Sustainable CT has created. So we'd love to ask you some questions, but let's give you a chance to give a little overview.
Sure. Hey, everybody, and thanks again for giving me the opportunity to talk with you guys tonight. So one question, actually, before I get into anything, am I able to share my screen, and will that show up on the video for everybody else?
It should.
You should.
Okay.
If not, I can always make
Have
it
you tried sharing?
No, not yet. It looks like I don't need to be a host to do that.
Yeah.
All right, let me know.
We see it.
Okay, it's the Sustainable CT Match Fund slide.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so I know that this will be sort of overview and redundant for you all, but anyways, I'll do a quick 30-second overview of Sustainable CT. We run a municipal certification program that works with cities and towns throughout the state to really promote, recognize, and celebrate wide-ranging sustainability actions that cities and towns are taking. So we have a menu of best practices, a roadmap, guides, and then within that, step-by-step actions in various categories. I mean, it's pretty wide-ranging: local economies, arts and culture, planning and resiliency, transportation, housing, energy efficiency, food systems, waste reduction, equity. So it's a really wide understanding of sustainability. And then within each of those categories, there's actions, basically action plans for what you can do to work on complete streets in your community, multimodal transportation, renewable energy, energy efficiency, things like that. So cities and towns, they do this work. Often it's municipal staff, elected officials, as well as many of the folks on this call are, volunteers who are coming together to help take these actions. So there are associated point totals with each of the steps that you do. Twice a year, you can submit to certification. If you earn enough points, you can get certified by Sustainable CT at the bronze or silver level. And eventually, hopefully, second place won't be best, and we will have a gold and things beyond that. So that's really the general overview of the program. And that's the municipal side of things. So a lot of that it's very planning and process oriented. And it's about putting in place the right framework and foundations for a sustainable community, a vibrant community. The Community Match Fund, which is what I'm here to talk about, is sort of the way in which we broaden the scope and bring in different partners, different groups, and make that a little bit more tangible and applicable for the average person or the average organization in a town. And it's also dollars on the table, which is really important. So did that move to the next slide? It did not. There we go. All right. So, fundamentally what this is a dollar for dollar match for public sustainability projects. Anybody in a community can access this program and can lead a project. And they can access up to $7,500 per project for any project. So it's not restricted to a municipally led project, to nonprofits. I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. It's really anybody in your community who has an idea that aligns with Sustainable CT's work is able to propose a project and to access this funding to do something that's public and that's sustainability related. 50% of the costs are covered by us, but this isn't done like a traditional matching grant would be, where you reach out to the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving and you have a $10,000 project and they say, okay, I'll give you $5,000 if you get $5,000 from somewhere else. Rather, we're matching community contributions through crowdfunding campaigns. So the intention of this is to say, we want to support projects that are broadly supported and engaging and involving the community. I know this happens all the time with municipal officials where they're talking to constituents, to residents, and they hear somebody say, oh, I had no idea we had that. I didn't know that was here. I didn't know that program existed. And so the idea through the match fund, beyond that it's dollars to support these types of projects, is also that it's engagement and awareness building. And so if you run a crowdfunding campaign that involves your local community, that people are contributing to and spreading the word about, that they feel ownership of that. They feel like they're a part of it. And so you don't have anybody asking, hey, are there trees there? Did we do this pocket park? Do we have a bike path or something like that? Because the whole community has already heard about this and been involved in the solution, rather than just in receiving the service or the good afterwards. So a lot of this, the dollars are really important, but the reason for having structured this as a fundraising campaign or a match to fundraising dollars is that we want these to be projects that the community is voicing support for, but also being involved in from the very beginning. So they're a part of forming the solution rather than just receiving the service. Your crowdfunding is a fairly new model. I have never led a crowdfunding campaign. I imagine most folks on this call haven't led one. So we've partnered with Patronicity, which is a civic crowdfunding platform that provides coaching. They work with some other statewide programs to run these types of campaigns. And so they have toolkits and resources and guides and fundraising coaches who are assigned to every project that's supported through Sustainable CT to help you run a crowdfunding campaign, to figure out how to engage the community. So there's a lot of support as you're working on these projects too. We're not just saying, okay, raise half, figure it out, and then we'll give you half. It's meant to be a collaborative, supported approach. I'll go into more detail on the crowdfunding and what that looks like in a second, but I just want to quickly run through sort of what the impact has looked like so far. So I think it's actually 93 projects since we launched in September of last year, so just over a year ago now. The average total budget for projects has been $15,000. So that means $7,500 from community, $7,500 from Sustainable CT. Across all 90 plus projects, there are, I think I was just checking this before I got on the call, around 3,150 donors. And so the average donation about that, I think this is on another slide, the median donation is $50. So these really they're small projects funded by people, and lots of donations coming together to make these things possible. But as you can see from the budgets, they do accomplish some pretty sizable projects. There's been, I think it's actually 989,000 and change in total investment into these 90 projects. So 545,000 of that is community contributions, and then 440,000 is Sustainable CT. That's kind of confusing because I know I said it's a dollar for dollar match, but sometimes when projects go either above their cap or that they just keep raising money, we have a cap, right? So if you raise outside of the cap, we won't continue to match that. But lots of projects have actually found that they're funded at 110, 120% of their goal. So that's the reason for the disparity there, with more community contributions than our match. And the map on the right is just showing you a graphic of where the projects have been. Many of those will be, I think New Haven has 17 projects. So you can't fit all the dots there, but a lot of these cities and towns have more than one project. Here's actually we won't go through this right now because that would be pretty tedious, but for future viewing, these are the towns that have projects, and the numbers in parentheses represent the number of projects in those towns. So you can see, like, I think Hartford has 11, New Haven has 17. There are a couple that have taken real advantage of this and led a lot of projects, and then others that have 1, 2, 3. I think I went through these already, but so going back to that, the median donation, $50, the average donation is $160. And that's skewed a little bit because we do allow some grant contributions to these projects. So without really getting into the weeds on that right now, it's a mix. The intention of this program is that it's primarily funded by small contributions by community, but some municipal budget dollars and some grant or institutional funding can be contributed. And then the map on the right, that's showing you all the zip codes where projects have come from, or where donations have come from, excuse me. So I just think that's a really cool thing to see, in that basically the entire state is covered at this point with donations. So people, even if there's not a project in their community, lots of folks are hearing about these and contributing to a neighboring project or something else. So a lot of engagement across the board. And one fun thing here, donations can come from anywhere, right? So they're not limited to only being contributions from the community where a project takes place. People can donate from anywhere. If I expanded this map out, there are also donations from internationally. So it's not as impressive because there's not tons of them, but I think I was looking and there are donations from England, from Spain, Germany, Pakistan, Mexico, an island in the Caribbean, but I didn't zoom in far enough to see what that was. So it's fun to see that these donations they're local projects. They're predominantly funded by local people because that's who cares about something that's happening in a community. But we all have networks that expand outside of our town, our state, anything like that. And people can and do contribute from anywhere. Okay, so jumping into the crowdfunding, which is really the most unusual mechanism of this. I mean, I know everybody understands what a matching grant is, and you get a dollar for dollar. Fundraising or crowdfunding is just fundraising. It's the online version of that. It's small scale. It's individuals, mostly people, although it could be local organizations, businesses contributing to things. But it's just a new variation of fundraising, right? Passing the hat of the same thing that folks have been doing for hundreds of years. So the difference really is that by having this program where it's online, one, you have this hosted online so that if someone wants to learn about your project, rather than having to come to you, go to a meeting, go see the thing, you can send them a link, they can click on it, read about the project, and then they can donate from where they are. So anybody can take out their credit card, donate specifically to your project so that they know the funds are going to this project, and there's transparency, budgets, things like that. so folks know that it has real structure and support and that the thing's actually going to happen. But it's just an added tool, essentially. You can still do in-person fundraising. If someone wants to write a check, they write a check to the group, the organization, and then you can go in there and log an offline donation to reflect that you received that. So all the traditional fundraising tools and resources can still be used with this. This is just an added one that makes it a lot easier, particularly when there's a pandemic going on and people are remote and not gathering in large spaces or in large groups. This makes it really easy to still connect with people, to still solicit contributions, and to get that involvement and engagement. I think I've gone through a lot of these already, but the first benefit of the match fund is that it's a fast, flexible, easy way to access matching dollars, right? It's free money from us. I'll go into the process of applying and accessing the funding, but there's no application, there's no standard forms to submit, there's no lengthy review period. We don't assess and score projects. If a project meets the eligibility criteria, it's approved, you're good to go. And this is a little bit of what I talked about before with the second bullet point there about crowdfunding, engaging the community in your work. The idea is that people who have contributed to this, they're bought in now, right? They're more likely to use that service, that amenity, that good, whatever it is, to care about it. And even if you get 100 donors to your campaign, probably 10 times that number heard about it, saw the link, read the thing, looked at the page. Maybe they didn't contribute, but now that they know this happened, and all those people who contributed to it are sort of now champions for this project, and they want to see it succeed. So it speaks to probably success and engagement, utilization of whatever you've done. It gives the community that sense of ownership. So they're not just receiving things, they're actually taking it into their own hands and making it happen. If you're an organization, or if you're looking for, let's say this is like the pilot for a larger project. So you run a crowdfunding campaign, you get 150 donors to it, lots of people contributing. Now you can reach out to a larger funder, to a community foundation for the larger scale permanent project. And it gives a lot of credibility when you can say 150 people in town didn't sign a petition, they donated to the thing. They want this to happen. They're literally bought into it. We've seen a lot of groups who said the crowdfunding campaign, was sort of like the launching point for their more robust plans, for their longer term plans. And it gives that credibility. And then it also diversifies and strengthens your base in that you're bringing new people into the fold, people who are hearing about your work, who are involved. Maybe they sign up to the newsletter now. Maybe you do solicit everybody's emails through the crowdfunding campaign. So it's a way to connect with people, to keep them engaged on the project. So it's just bringing lots of people in. And you can see a quote there that say it's the fundraising campaign that began the community engagement. There are other ones that there was a project not done through us, but through a past crowdfunding partner that raised $75,000, and they said the community engagement was the more important part of this than the money. This is just a graphic to show basically what this looks like. So every project that's approved runs a patronicity crowdfunding campaign. That's the partner who we've contracted out to provide the coaching and the services. And the benefit of the crowdfunding campaign is that it provides, you post a budget, you post a description, you post an action plan to that. So people who are coming across this, they can read that. They can understand what you're going to do, but they can also see that there's good transparency here. You're outlining what you're going to spend the money on. They know then, as they look at that, oh, these people have the capacity to actually do this project right now. So you're not asking them to Cash App you or Venmo you or something like that. And they're sort of saying, okay, but how do I know what's going to happen? There's that transparency. In the bottom right here, it also says that it's eligible for a matching grant from Sustainable CT. Up in the top, it says that it's supported by Sustainable CT. So folks can also see that there's another organization sort of sponsoring this and involved with the work. Once you have the campaign designed, the description put together, you start reaching out to people and soliciting contributions. Here you can see, this is a new project on the right-hand side there. So it only had 2 patrons when I took this screenshot. You set a deadline. So all these fundraising campaigns have somewhere between like a 1 month to 2 month deadline because you want to create that sense of urgency. Donors can donate with credit cards, or they can do it any way they want. They can hand you cash, they can give you a check. You can log those donations and have it reflected towards your goal. And then we commit to double every dollar donated once you hit your crowdfunding goal. So it's structured sort of as a challenge match in that you set out to raise $5,000, you raise the $5,000, that unlocks the matching grant from us. So it incentivizes donors, but also the project leaders to really push that whole time. Because once you get close to your goal, people know, okay, if we get them over the line, now that doubles their money. So it's a booster against complacency there. Here's what this actually looks like. So this is a new project. It just went up recently. This is what the homepage essentially looks like, though. You have that list of the amount that you've hit towards your goal. So all crowdfunding campaigns always have that sort of temperature bar that shows what you've raised and what you're looking for, the Sustainable CT grant. And then if we were on the website and scrolled down, that's where all the other information would go. The description of the project, the budget, the action plan, those types of things. So this is an Iob project, and this is the one I was talking about the engagement. It's a Hampline. Iob is the past crowdfunding partner that we worked with. It was a bike line in Memphis. So here's where the bike line was, sort of the route that it took. That's where the donations came from. So this is the really fun stuff to see, that these really are projects that sort of like excite and engage the community. And when people see that there's something local happening and they're involved in it, they want to support it. Looking at eligibility, it's really broad. So, I mean, fundamentally what it is that you have to have a public project that's accessible to the public or creates a public good or benefit. And it needs to align really broadly with sustainable CT actions. So as you guys know, the sub actions to our program are really specific, right? Like it's hyper specific, do this very particular action, form this committee, do this plan, work with an arborist, whatever it is. The match fund is much, much, much broader than that. So anything that aligns with the objective, the intent of one of our actions is eligible for funding. So one of the examples that I always use is the tree planting one that we have, Action 2.9. The sub-steps to that are form a forestry advisory commission, do a tree plan, work with an arborist, do all these other things. For the match fund, the objective of that action states basically do projects that enhance and protect tree cover in your community. So any idea that aligns with that, enhancing and protecting tree cover, that's eligible. So it's much, much, much broader than the municipal certification program is. Basically, our actions are meant to be a guide that say, hey, here's all the stuff that falls under our umbrella of what we can fund. And then you need to receive at least 20 donations to your crowdfunding campaign. So the idea being that there needs to be, those 20 donors show that there's at least some level of community support for these projects. I've gone through this already, but again, it really is anybody who can participate. You don't need a fiscal sponsor. It doesn't need to be a formal 501c3 or municipality. It could be 3 people walking down the street who say, why isn't there a park here? Why don't we have bike lanes? As long as if it's a public project and they need permits or something from the municipality, they need to get those. But anybody can lead a project. Anybody can access the funding. It doesn't need to go to a town bank account, a 501c3 bank account, or something like that. And like I mentioned before, the process is really streamlined. So we don't have application deadlines. It's rolling. You can propose at any time. There's no standard formal proposal. It's just a conversation with me. If the work meets the eligibility criteria, you're approved. So we don't assess projects. We don't review them and score and go, okay, this one got 95 points. We'll give these guys $5,000. This one got 80 points. We'll give them $3,000. Everybody's eligible to receive up to the cap for their project, as long as that's what their budget needs. And as long as it meets the criteria, you're approved. If folks in town choose to fund the project, that's the indicator that people care about it and that it deserves to be funded. So then it's going to receive the match from us. And then on the back end, you don't do staggered funds disbursement where like you get the money as costs are incurred. You get everything up front once you finish the campaign. And all we have afterwards is like a 10-minute post-fundraising and post-implementation survey. So you're not filling out grant reports, telling us how you met our outcome measures and metrics and things like that. It's meant to be a really streamlined standard process that makes it super easy and accessible for everybody and people who don't want to spend hours writing grants and reporting on grants. So that's really what it is. I mean, it's a pretty simple program and process. There are projects that I talked to someone today who has an idea in Litchfield that's a really clear fit. And this was the first I'd heard of the project. She sent over some info. We approved it. She's creating the crowdfunding page tonight and she's going to launch it tomorrow. So in lots of cases, the turnaround time on this, it really could be as little as a day. You propose a project, you're approved, you can go forward and access the funding, which is really what this is meant to do. Rather than saying, okay, you missed the application deadline, wait 4 months, apply. We'll get back to you in 4 months and let you know if you got anything. The hope is that we're making this accessible where people who are sort of energized and excited and want to do something, that they can access it when there's excitement for the project and when it's relevant. So that's the spiel. Do you guys have questions about it?
So, Abe, I have a couple questions.
Sure.
First, I'm just curious, where's your source of money come from?
So it's mostly private family foundations, and it's the same funders who fund Sustainable CT in general. So the Hampshire Foundation, or excuse me, not the Hampshire, the Smart Seed Fund, Emily Hall Tremaine, and the Green Bank, I think, are the 3 funders for this current round.
Okay, so you've got some deep pockets behind you that are helping to support this.
Yeah, it's all philanthropy.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then if we come up upon a project, I mean, $15,000 sounds like a lot of money, but in some instances it may not be enough. And if we find ourselves involved in a bigger project and we have like a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, can we think about getting funding for each of the phases, or would it just be for the project as a whole?
No, you can. So that's a really good question too, particularly because our match cap has shifted. When we first launched the program, it was 25,000. Then we sort of made it a variable one, and it was 25,000 for certain types of projects, 15,000 for others. Then we recently cut it down. This is within like the last 2 months, to 7,500. So the first thing is that that number is sort of fluid, right? And it also does depend on funding and priorities. So we may up that cap again, and it may be 15,000. There's also some flexibility where if a project meets, ticks all the boxes that we have and all the funder priorities and things like that, we may be able to, on a case-by-case basis, look at that and say, okay, so what you really need is a match of 10,000. Sure, we can do that. So in some cases, we can be flexible and sort of work with folks on it. But regarding phases, yes, 100%. As long as there are distinct phases to it where you can say, here's the thing that we'll accomplish in phase 1, here's what phase 2 will be. Yeah, having done a crowdfunding campaign for one doesn't preclude you from doing another one.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And sort of in that same
way. Hey, Abe.
Hey, Sherry. Real quickly, I'll just say there's no restriction on the number of projects. So folks in Simsbury will not be competing with each other to access the funding for one of these projects, right? As you saw, New Haven has 17, Hartford has 11. So the fact that one group in Simsbury might be doing a project, another 10 groups could all be doing projects at the same time. Each group is restricted to running a crowdfunding campaign only one at a time, but you could do one and then run another. So having done a campaign doesn't mean a group can't access funding again. And any number of groups in town could all be fundraising at the same time. Probably wouldn't be a great idea because they'd be competing with each other, but they could be.
And you may have touched on this earlier, but is it limited to just one, though, that is through the town itself?
No, so it's the same for the town. It's one at a time, in that the town as an entity could only be actively leading. So let's say that Department of Public Works led a project. They could only be actively leading one. That would be the town's project, I guess. And so a different town department couldn't be leading a project at that same time, but 6 community groups in town could be.
Okay, right. So that because that part has remained the same as far as it just being one town supported fundraising.
Yeah. One municipal project, one municipally led project at a time. But DPW could lead a project, and then Parks and Rec could lead a project right after that.
So, and you mentioned that it was a 1 to 2 month time frame generally. I mean, is 2 months the max as far as the deadline? 2
months is the max that anybody can start out with anyways. The idea for that being that if you launch a crowdfunding campaign and put a 4-month deadline, there's no incentive for people to donate right now. They're going to look, I mean, the goal of this, or the attractiveness of it, is that it's immediate. People are looking at it and they're saying, these guys want money. They're saying and it's September 15th. On November 1st, by their deadline, they're going to start doing the thing. So if I contribute now, that thing will actually happen in a month and a half. Whereas if you put this deadline of 4 or 5, 6 months, something way further out, people look at it and go, okay, great, I'll come back in 5 months. And then they don't come back, right? So it's too long a deadline for the donors in that they look at it and it's not immediate. And then for the project leaders too, it can create a sense of complacency where people, they launch a campaign, they don't really work on it that much, they come back to it later. But then by that point, lots of people have seen this thing. It's been out there and lingering for a long time. Maybe you've raised 10% of your funds, everybody's seen it, and it's sort of, at that point, it looks unsuccessful. And so then when you really start ramping up 2 months in, people are they've sort of written it off already. So we've found that 1 to 2 months is like the right amount of time where you can get the word out. People have time to hear about it, to communicate with others, to go find their wallets and their credit cards and whatever else. But it's not so much time that people sort of don't feel the sense of immediacy.
So if it's a committee that is, or a committee or a commission that's part of the town, but it's volunteers, is that considered a municipally led fundraising
No,
event?
No, because if it's volunteers who are doing that, it's a community group. It doesn't matter that it be a town committee or commission in name. And so you could even use so projects, when you launch a project, if there is a fiscal sponsor or if it's led by a tax exempt entity, that gets posted there too. So donors will see X nonprofit is a 501c3 tax exempt, your donations are tax deductible. And so if it's a project that's led by a town committee, hopefully the town would make their bank accounts available, and so you could donate money there rather than having Mark use his personal bank account and people look at it and go, hey, that guy's about to send $15,000 to his bank account. Like, what's going on here? But so even in that case, if the town is showing up as the fiscal sponsor, that wouldn't mean we would distinguish between a project that is led by, I guess, an elected official or a municipal department and one that's led by a committee of volunteers.
Okay. Oh, great.
I was going to suggest, why don't we stop screen sharing for the common discussion?
Good idea.
That was a purely hypothetical example about Mark's bank account, I think. Do you think the funding will go on for a while? I mean, my immediate reaction is we need to be shouting this from the mountaintops. That there are all kinds of groups in town that, if they knew that they could get together and raise $500, $1,000, a couple $1,000 to do something, that there's matching funds, this would really get things going. And I think we need to get on local community TV with this message. And I mean, unless you think the thing's going to run out soon. No.
So, I mean, we launched it a year ago. It's a first come, first serve program. So if everybody got out and was really actively spreading the word and people were taking advantage of it, yes, theoretically the money could run out. The intention when we launched this program was that, and this is, as we understand it anyways, the intention of the funders too, that more money will become available when money runs out, because that's the indication that the program is successful, that people are interested, that it's getting stuff done, right? Is the money getting used up? So we plan to just sort of run it continuously. That's where I was saying there's no deadlines, there's not really funding rounds. We did have a gap from June to July of this year when we switched crowdfunding partners. So there was a 1 month gap as we got the new platform set up and switched there. But the intention is that it just keeps running and that the money will self-replenish and comes from a never-ending spring. Obviously, that's not the case. You know, money can run out. Funders could change their priority and say, we hate everything that you funded. These projects are terrible. They don't meet my goals. No more money. But so far, that's not the indications that we've gotten, and we think we're going to be able to just sort of keep rolling.
And is there any shift in priorities you think of the funders?
No, so I mean, greenhouse gas reductions and climate impact is that's the priority, but we don't have the program structured in that way, right? The way that it's set up is that it's an objective eligibility criteria, and it's the entire program. So it's any sustainable CT action. It doesn't have to fall under the energy efficiency or the climate actions. So because we don't want to be assessing projects and rating them and saying, okay, well, you know, climate's the focus, so come back to us in a couple months, because then it just becomes another grant program and it disincentivizes people from participating. So right now it's broad, it's open to anybody. Really where we might sort of reassess and factor in the priorities are if someone came to us with a project to put solar panels on a municipal facility, yeah, we'd probably say, okay, we can up the cap. If 30 grand's really what's going to get you there, we can look at increasing our cap and making sure that we still do a dollar for dollar match. So those are the ones where we might increase it for projects that check all the boxes and that we know are things that folks are looking to have happen. But it's open to anything right now.
I noticed you said you had on one of your slides that there is one in Simsbury.
Yeah, so
going on right now
of the Simsbury Grange led a farmer apprenticeship program. So I think it was something the Grange had been hoping to do for years, but it was a partnership with local farmers who sort of want to pass on their knowledge, and with interested, I'm not even sure if the folks had to be Simsbury residents or if it could be anybody, but it was Simsbury farmers and then folks who want to learn about farming to apprentice with them. So the farmers got a stipend and it paid for some supplies and things like that, and then placed students effectively with these farmers to learn about agriculture.
Oh, wow. So is that event over?
Good. So,
Is she still fundraising or is it over?
no. So she fundraised for that I guess in the spring. And now I assume the apprenticeship
Okay.
is still going on. But so that was through the initial, I don't want to say rounds because this is really meant to be sort of a continuous program, but let's just say that was through round 1 before we switched to the new crowdfunding partner. So Susan and the Grange fundraised for that. And then they raised the money, I think by like the beginning of early summer. And now the apprenticeships are happening. So I think there was an article recently in it was either the Grange newsletter or something like that talking about it. I could dig that up and send it over to you.
Okay. Yeah, because I remember that she was looking into it and I didn't realize that it happened, like that she went through with it, because I thought there was some kind of glitch, and so I didn't think it was going to go through. So I'm glad to hear it did.
It may have been that I think they were running up against deadlines, right? They wanted to get people placed with farmers and actually out there doing work before it was too late. And then that may have also been when we were transitioning to the new crowdfunding partner. So there may have been an imposed deadline on our part in that we couldn't have projects fundraising endlessly on Iob when we were transitioning over to Patronicity.
Okay.
That's a good example of Susan from the Grange is very aware of these types of things and was able to take advantage of that. And my guess is there are other groups out there who would get something started if they knew. So I think we should find a way. The way that jumps out at me is a little Simsbury community TV program, or just to get the word out, because I think some of us have known about this and talked about it in smaller circles for a while, but I think there are a bunch of other potential projects that would be people and committees and groups that would be pretty excited to know that this could happen.
Yeah, and so that's really sort of our goal too. Is we want to support all projects led by. It could be a huge nonprofit, it could be the municipality, it can be a city, whatever. But we've structured the program so that it's accessible to grassroots group, right? That's the reason that there's no grant applications and not deadlines in grant reporting, because those groups, they don't have grant writers. They don't have people who can sit down and do that. They're out there doing something, or they want to do something. And all of that sort of bureaucracy stands in the way of people actually getting out and doing the work. So we're working constantly. I'm always reaching out to folks and trying to connect. But when there's 113 towns participating in a program, it's hard to connect with all the different groups locally. So the program is appropriate to share with anyone. It's meant to be open. The first step is an email and a phone call with me. So even if there are groups who you're looking at and thinking, sometimes because it's very open, we'll get some ideas that just aren't a fit. And where someone says, oh, money, yeah, contact Sustainable CT, reach out to them. And those aren't always great, because then someone reaches out about a skate park or something like that. And skate parks are great, but they fall outside of our area. So I don't want to overstate that anyone can access this funding to do anything they want. It does have to fall within Sustainable CT's work, but it really is pretty broad and does touch on lots of things that different groups who you might not immediately connect with our work are doing or would like to be doing.
I'm thinking, wouldn't we be able to have this presentation that's happening right now? Because it's live on SCTV, that we could ask them if they could just show it more frequently and maybe, promote it through the library, perhaps through Eric's Facebook page. That's one way we could do it as well.
To go beyond the 12 people who are probably watching right now.
Right.
Well, so does the town do a quarterly newsletter or something like that too?
Even more often?
Monthly.
News and events, yeah.
So if that has good distribution, I could also put together it could be a blurb, a paragraph, or it could be a sort of a one-pager or something like that. One of the barriers is just it's always hard to get people in a room or to sit down and to really look at something, right? You can post things in an email or social media or Facebook, but we all see hundreds and thousands of those a day, and it's hard to really get someone to pay attention to it, even if they've seen it. So one of the ways I would say to make folks aware of something, and this is going back to what I was saying in the presentation, is the crowdfunding campaign itself. So what we've seen in a lot of towns is that when someone leads a project, particularly a successful one that has some visibility in the work that's actually done afterwards, that then leads to a flood of other people reaching out and wanting to lead projects because they see this, they hear about it, and then either the project leader connects with other people or the 150 people who donated now, some portion of them says, hey, I could probably do something like this. Obviously, that requires someone to lead the crowdfunding campaign and have the capacity to do all of those things, but it is a good way of making people aware of what's going on. And in seeing that it's possible, right? Because one of the barriers too, I think, is that crowdfunding is new. Crowdfunding is also often associated with, before we launched this program, I basically thought of it as people who post a GoFundMe because they want to go on vacation to Italy, or you see the more traditional ones if there's medical bills or catastrophe or something like that, but it's usually those things. It's like a personal thing. And often in my circle, it's people who want like vacation or something like that. And so there is some question of that folks don't always think of crowdfunding as a way to do civic infrastructure, right? It's more so associated with personal things. So when people see a project and realize, oh, this is a way of actually getting public stuff done in my community and things that fall outside the scope of government, they then are often inspired to say, hey, I could do that. Why do we have to wait for the town to build that pocket park or to do the EV charger or something? We can just do it. Not to say the town shouldn't build a pocket park and do the EV charger, but
right. Is there a commonality as far as the types of events, fundraising events that are happening?
They're really wide ranging. So you mean in terms of the types of projects?
Yes, like there's the Pollinator Pathways. I know that's a popular one right now.
Oh, sure. So actually, that's a good point. I was going to say that they're really wide ranging, but Pollinator Pathway, that's really popular, also really successful. Tree planting campaigns, community gardens, those have probably been the three that we've seen the most of. And they're also super tangible, right? Everybody knows what a community garden is. They can envision that. It feels good. If you're going to do street trees or create an arboretum in a park, I don't think we've had a tree planting campaign that hasn't shot over its budget by 100%. They just shoot straight over it because people associate it with climate change, one. It feels good. You can measure the positive impacts that it has. And then they can see it when it's happening, right? So you can go out there and have folks, they can volunteer so part of the campaign can be that let's say it's street trees and this may not be that relevant in Simsbury, but that fall along the sort of the right of way, but are in people's yards where residents commit to watering the tree for a year or something like that. And so they're tree adopters. But it's a way of involving people in the work beyond just the crowdfunding campaign. But those three have been certainly the most common ones that we've seen and just super, super successful because they're so visible. Community gardens also address a real need during COVID. We're now entering a period where both tree planting, all three of those are not super relevant in November and December. You're probably not going to get out there and do it over the winter. But any local sustainable food systems projects have been really successful, and a lot of those have popped up during COVID because it's responding to a need for food insecurity. But then there's other stuff. There's arts and culture is a component of our program. So if people wanted to do sculptures, art park, murals, things like that, we've seen some of those, and those are fun too. They're tangible, they're visible. It's a good way to get the word out and to do something that feels good and that's really community focused. There was a project in New Haven with a local muralist who does, it's about stormwater education. So murals that say things like what goes in the drain goes, now I'm going to get it wrong. What goes down goes in the sound, something like that. They're neat rhymes and things that sort of tell people, hey, what you throw in your storm drains, they don't just go to sewers and get filtered out. It goes into your waterways. So it's a stormwater education project, but working with local youth to do murals all over and different educational events, cross-street banners and things like that. So there are lots of fun projects too that probably wouldn't cost tons of money, but that would be super visible when they were implemented as well. So it'd be sort of engagement and awareness building running the campaign, but then people would see the thing and be able to talk about it afterwards too.
You mentioned that I'm assuming that you've done a solar campaign for a building.
Yeah, so not for the actual infrastructure. The example that I chose in some of the slides there was intentional. It's also one that PACE, Mark's group, is also supporting. So in Branford, they're running a heat smart and solar, or it's basically like a renewables and energy efficiency campaign where They're sending out mailers, they're doing newspaper advertisements, lawn signs. I think there's some cross street, or it may not be cross street banners, but it's basically just an educational program. Mark, you could probably speak to this better than I can. But so what we've seen is that the physical infrastructure, putting up solar panels, doing these larger projects, our cap, whether it's 7,500, 15,000, or 25, or even if it's 50,000, it's probably not going to move the needle on most of those. Those projects cost large amounts of money. There's also often state and federal programs to help fund them, right? So there's incentives, there's financing options and things like that. So if there were a project that for some reason, maybe the study on the front end or some aspect of it fell outside of the incentives and didn't work out, and our program could help to make that possible or to do the first steps or to close the gap, I think that would be a really neat way to use it and to involve the community in one of these larger projects. But more often than not, those are big projects. They're financed through the Green Bank, through Eversource programs and things like that. So the areas where I think we're able to be more effective with those is, EV chargers. That program from the state doesn't exist right now. So Essex did a campaign to get an EV charger in town. But then it's a lot of the stuff about education. And so the Branford campaign, I think, is great in that it's educating residents, but it's also working with the home energy solutions contractors to help residents sort of walk through that. And then there was a project in New Haven by Neighborhood Housing Services that created an energy concierge program. So they obviously have a pretty large customer or service base. But they worked with a consultant, they set up different pathways. And so they did advertising and things like that to bring in homeowners and renters and to teach them about what they could do in their home. But then they took it a bit further than a lot of the existing programs can do, in that they had built-in follow-up with these people, built-in meetings to keep getting together with them, to walk them through the financing options, to help them take care of some of those things. So it moved from saying, okay, we'll do an audit and then tell you what you can do in your house, to saying, we'll do an audit and then we'll work with you to actually figure out how to do that stuff in your house. But those are the areas where I think, in terms of energy campaigns and things like that, that we can be probably most helpful.
Could you envision taking that energy concierge concept and then spreading that to other towns? I mean, that's an interesting. I think that's Michael Ewell, right?
Yeah, and Kathy Fay with NHS. So that was our hope, actually, was that program would because it's totally replicable. There's nothing specific to them that would make it so that another city or town couldn't do that. And I know NHS is happy to share that information because it was their hope too that it would spread. I mean, they were just hoping within New Haven that maybe the community management teams and other groups would take it on and run similar programs. But I was presenting at something in Hartford months ago about that program, and one of the sustainability reps from the city of Hartford was there and was taking notes on it and was pretty interested. And they have some similar programs, but I don't think quite to that level. So yeah, our hope is that other people will see that, similar to the Branford campaign, right? All of these are, part of what's fun about them is that they're public. It's anyone can see what the campaign is and can learn about it and can reach out to the project leaders. And we hope that this, this is the same as Sustainable CT's municipal program, in that everything that a town submits is made available to everybody else, so that you don't have to start from scratch and say, okay, let's figure this out in a vacuum and pretend no one else ever did it. But instead you could just reach out to the team in Branford and say, hey, what do you guys do? Can we have your materials? We're going to do the same thing.
That's great. I love the concierge idea.
Yeah, that's an awesome project.
That's really, yeah, definitely.
I'm going to have to.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you, Abe, for I've heard this presentation before, but every time I hear it, I learn a lot more, and it just reminds me this is such a great opportunity we're not milking. So let's take this discussion further amongst ourselves, how we get the word out. But thank you.
Yeah, of course, that sounds great. I was going to say this is probably the 10th time you've heard me go over this program, so I'm sorry that you had to listen to it again.
It's better every time.
Well, Mark's going to be our community match fund pro for Simsbury.
So I would say I'm always happy to talk with anyone. So if you guys have questions or something about that, Sherry, I know Mark has myself, but I think you do too.
Yep.
So feel free to share that with anybody. Any of you guys are welcome to reach out if you want to bounce ideas around. I mean, the whole point is that it's sort of iterative, where someone has an idea, and even if that idea may not be a clear fit, that hopefully it leads to something else where we say, well, that might not work, but maybe this could, or maybe this group could help with that. And then any group in town is welcome to reach out too. The point is that it's something that people can access. And the worst case situation is that we say no, but even that is really rare in that like that one project may be a no, but hopefully the conversation then leads to other ideas and other things that that person or that group might do.
Well, that's great. Does anybody else have questions for Abe? Well, it was a great presentation. Thank you so much for coming tonight and joining us. I should say, I was going to say coming to Simsbury, but, you know, virtually coming to Simsbury and presenting to us. And we were supposed to do this back in, April or May, I think it was, before things kind of went a little crazy.
Yeah, something else came up. Who knows what that was?
Yeah. Right, exactly, and then we had to wait until we got started having meetings again. So I think it's perfect timing because I think people are just wanting to just become active again, if you will, especially during the winter time and not knowing what might be coming around the corner for as far as our society with regards to the coronavirus and everything. So this gives us something that we can work on, or other people, other groups, that can work on this as well that want to participate. So thank you. And anything that you can send to us, any information that you want to provide, you can forward it to me and I can pass it along. And I'm going to check into SCTV to see if we can just rerun this presentation. And if not, then maybe we could set up another presentation directly with SCTV to the public, to the residents of Simsbury.
Sure. Just keep me posted on that, and I'm happy to sort of talk through it and present again. Would it be helpful to send over the PowerPoint too, so that you guys can share that? I tried to, when I was putting it together, make it so that it was something that was like pretty explanatory without additional information, so that someone just reading through it could look at it and go like, okay, I get the idea.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great, because there's a couple people not with us, and I can share it with them as well.
Awesome.
All right, so you can either stay on or click off, whatever you want to do, Abe, but thank you again. I really appreciate you joining us this evening.
Yeah, of course. This was great. Thanks for having me on. I will jump off, but again, Let me enjoy the rest of your meeting and let me know if there's anything I can do to help out.
Will do. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Abe.
Yep.
So, so Mark said he opened the meeting. Did he officially open the meeting? I missed that. Mike, you're on mute.
Okay, I'm unmuting myself. Okay.
There you go.
We did start the meeting officially, and we postponed doing a minutes of the meeting review, mainly because I couldn't find a copy of the minutes review from last time. So
I couldn't either. Did anybody, who took the minutes?
I don't know, but I know I missed it last time. So
Okay, I'll have to maybe go back and watch that meeting and see who was doing it.
We
So
may
we'll
not
have to.
we may not have had a quorum for that one, right?
Oh, you know what? I think you're right. I think you're right. That was the case. So we won't need to review those minutes then. Just Rich and Jeff, I'll just let you know that we had Jess LeClaire join us last month, and she just shared with us some of the changes that are going to be happening with the certification program. They're adding, a bunch of items and kind of just reorganizing how it's being done. And so that's on SCTV, and I think I may have sent you some information on that as well. And I probably have that presentation, and I can forward it to you as well if you wanted to view it. And I didn't have anything else on the agenda. I really wanted to just focus on the community match fund and give Abe all the time we could. So as far as announcements, I will just say that Sarah Kramer has announced that she's going to be stepping down And she has someone that wants to take her position representing Culture, Parks, and Rec. So we've passed that information on to Tom, and I think that they need to do the official process of her sending in her resignation letter and the other person being appointed and approved by the Board of Selectmen. So once I think that's taken care of, it probably take, I would think, at least a couple weeks or so. And our next meeting is November. It's the third week of November. And let's see. I have the agenda in front of me. So that's the 17th of November at 6 o'clock. And what we were thinking of doing is to, rather than wait until next year, to, I should say 2023, rather than waiting to get recertified, that we just start the process now and take the actions and just start divvying it up. Like everybody take like 2 actions and we just start working on it now and start putting it together and uploading it into our dashboard. And this way we can be on top of the changes, but also it keeps us in the process, if you will. I mean, some of the communities are actually getting certified every year. They're not waiting the full 3 years. They're just doing it every year just to keep the momentum going and constantly updating the information. So it also, I think, allows you to take on some new things because it's fresh in your mind as far as what you want to do as far as a new action. So that's probably what we'll discuss at our meeting next month. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? Any updates or announcements? Okay, so does anybody want to make a motion to close?
I'll make a motion to close.
Okay.
Second.
Second? Rich seconds it. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Raise your hand. All right, great. So, all right, so the meeting.